Standing at the altar in a $1,000 gown, Scarlett Monroe was about to do something no one had ever dared: destroy Victor Romano in front of everyone who feared him. The Mafia Boss stood beside her, confident, untouchable, waiting to seal a marriage that would make him unstoppable. But Scarlett wasn't there to say, "I do." She was there to burn his empire to the ground. One recording, one truth, one moment that would change everything. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Scarlett's revenge travels. The first time Scarlett Monroe saw Victor Romano, he was breaking a man's nose. She'd been standing in the back office of her family's restaurant, Monroe's, a place that had fed Chicago's elite for 3 generations, counting receipts when the shouting started. Her father had told her to stay put, his voice tight with something she'd never heard before: fear. But Scarlett had never been good at following orders. She'd cracked the door open just enough to see into the dining room. The restaurant had closed an hour ago, chairs stacked on tables, floors mopped clean. 3 men in expensive suits surrounded a fourth, some accountant type who'd made the mistake of stealing from the wrong people. And in the center of it all stood Victor Romano. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even looked particularly angry. He'd simply nodded, and one of his men had grabbed the accountant by the collar and slammed his face into the marble bar top. The crack echoed through the empty restaurant. Blood sprayed across the white marble her grandfather had imported from Italy. Scarlett should have been horrified, should have closed the door and pretended she'd seen nothing. Instead, she'd watched Victor pull out a handkerchief, wipe a spot of blood from his cufflink, and smile. That was 14 months ago. Now, she stood in front of a full-length mirror in a suite at the Drake Hotel, wearing a wedding dress that cost more than most people made in a year. Ivory silk, hand-beaded lace, a train that pooled on the floor like spilled champagne. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist, diamond earrings, Victor's gift, catching the afternoon light. She looked perfect. She felt nothing. "You're absolutely stunning," her mother said from the doorway, tears already streaming down her carefully made-up face. Margaret Monroe had been crying on and off for 3 days, overwhelmed by the whirlwind of planning a wedding to one of the most powerful men in Chicago. "Your father would be so proud." Scarlett's reflection didn't change. "Would he?" Her mother flinched. They both knew the answer. Thomas Monroe had signed over half his business to Victor Romano 6 months ago, part of the arrangement that came with courting his daughter. He'd smiled through gritted teeth at every dinner, every meeting, every moment Victor's hand possessively gripped Scarlett's waist. He died of a heart attack 3 months later. The doctor said it was stress. Scarlett knew it was shame. "He wanted you to be taken care of," Margaret said softly, adjusting a fold in Scarlett's train that didn't need adjusting. He's powerful. He can protect you." "From what?" Scarlett asked, her voice flat. Her mother didn't answer. They both knew that too. In Victor Romano's world, you didn't need protection from outside threats. You needed protection from him. A knock on the door interrupted them. Sofia Delgado, Scarlett's maid of honor and oldest friend, stuck her head in. "The cars are here. 10 minutes. Margaret kissed Scarlett's cheek, leaving a lipstick mark she immediately wiped away with her thumb. "I'll see you downstairs, sweetheart." When the door closed, Sophia crossed the room and grabbed Scarlett's hand. "Last chance," she whispered. "We can walk right out that door. My car's parked on the side street. We could be in Wisconsin before anyone even notices." Scarlett had met Sophia in college, back when her biggest concern was passing organic chemistry and not who ran the city's underground economy. Sophia had been the wild one, the friend who got them into clubs and talked them out of trouble. Now she worked as a nurse at County General, patching up knife wounds and bullet holes without asking questions. She knew exactly what kind of man Victor Romano was. "I can't," Scarlett said. "You mean you won't?" "Same thing." Sophia's grip tightened. "Scar, listen to me. I've seen what men like him do. I've held the hands of women who thought they could handle it, thought they could survive it. This isn't some romance novel where the dangerous guy falls in love and changes his ways. This is real, and it's going to destroy you." Scarlett pulled her hand free and reached for her clutch. Inside, hidden beneath lipstick and tissue paper, was her phone. On that phone was a recording that would either save her life or end it. She hadn't decided which yet. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. Sophia stared at her for a long moment, searching for something in her expression. Whatever she saw made her shoulders slump. "Fine. But when this goes to hell, and it will, you call me. Day or night, I'll come get you." "I know." They rode to the church in silence, Sophia texting furiously on her phone while Scarlett watched Chicago blur past the tinted windows. The city looked beautiful in early October, leaves turning gold and red, Lake Michigan glittering in the distance. She'd grown up here, knew every street and shortcut, every corner where her father used to buy her ice cream after school. Victor had promised her the whole city. He'd lied about that too. St. Catherine's Cathedral rose above the surrounding buildings like a monument to old money and older power. Scarlett's family had attended Mass here for generations, back when Chicago's elite still pretended to care about things like tradition and propriety. Now it was just another stage for people like Victor to display their influence. The parking lot was full of town cars and SUVs, security personnel in dark suits stationed at every entrance. She recognized faces from the newspapers, aldermen, judges, businessmen who made their money in ways that didn't show up on tax returns. Victor's world, laid out like a wedding guest list. Her mother was waiting at the side entrance, flanked by two of Victor's men. They didn't speak to Scarlett, just fell into step behind her as she made her way to the bride's room. Protection, Victor called it. Surveillance was closer to the truth. The room was decorated with white roses and lilies, their scent cloying in the small space. Someone had set up a small table with champagne and fruit, untouched. Scarlett's stomach had been in knots for days. 15 minutes, one of the guards said, checking his watch. Not asking, informing. Scarlett nodded. 15 minutes until she walked down that aisle. 15 minutes until she stood in front of 400 people and promised to love, honor, and obey a man who'd built his empire on violence and fear. 15 minutes until she burned it all down. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Second thoughts? She deleted it without responding. Victor's people monitored everything. Calls, texts, emails. She'd learned that the hard way 3 months ago when she'd tried to confide in a college friend about her doubts. The friend had stopped returning her calls. Scarlett never found out what Victor had said to her, but she could guess. The door opened and Elena Castellanos walked in, Victor's sister and the closest thing he had to a weakness. She was tall and striking, with the same dark eyes and sharp cheekbones as her brother, but where Victor was all cold calculation, Elena burned hot. She'd punched a reporter at a charity gala once for asking about her family's business interests. Scarlett had liked her immediately. "You look like you're about to throw up," Elena said, closing the door behind her. She'd insisted on not being part of the wedding party, claiming she looked terrible in bridesmaid dresses. Really, Scarlett suspected she just hated wearing anything she was told to. "Nerves," Scarlett lied. Elena pulled a flask from her clutch and took a long drink before offering it to Scarlett. "Bullshit. I've seen you handle my brother's business associates without breaking a sweat. This is something else." Scarlett took the flask. Whiskey, expensive and smooth. It burned going down. "Maybe I'm just having second thoughts about marrying into a crime family. Bit late for that." "Is it?" Elena's expression shifted, something careful sliding into place. "Scarlett, whatever you're thinking about doing, don't." "I'm not thinking about anything." "Yes, you are. I can see it." Elena took the flask back, her movements deliberate. "Look, I know my brother isn't easy. I know he's controlling and paranoid and treats people like chess pieces. But he cares about you. In his own completely fucked up way, he does." Scarlett almost laughed. "Does he?" "He wouldn't have gone through all this trouble if he didn't. Victor doesn't do grand gestures. He doesn't marry people. He's had the same girlfriend on the side for 3 years and never once considered making it official." Elena paused. "Until you." The words hit like a slap. Girlfriend. 3 years. Scarlett's face must have given something away because Elena cursed under her breath. "Shit, you didn't know. Tell me you're joking." I thought he would have ended it before now. Before this." Elena ran a hand through her hair, destroying hours of careful styling. "Her name is Vanessa. She runs a gallery in River North. It's not serious, just convenient." "Convenient." Scarlett's voice came out flat, mechanical. He's been fucking someone else while planning our wedding, and it's convenient. That's not what I meant. Get out. Scarlett, get out before I scream, and trust me, you don't want to explain to Victor why his bride is having a breakdown 15 minutes before the ceremony. Elena hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to her brother and something that might have been sympathy. Finally, she set the flask on the table. For what it's worth, I think you're too good for him. I always have. When the door closed, Scarlett counted to 10, then 20. Then she stopped counting and picked up her phone. The recording was 3 minutes and 47 seconds long. She'd captured it by accident 2 weeks ago, when she'd forgotten her phone in Victor's study during one of his late-night calls. She'd gone back for it, heard his voice through the door, and something, instinct, suspicion, divine intervention, had made her start recording before she walked in. She'd listened to it 17 times since then, knew every word by heart, Victor's voice cold and businesslike. The Monroe thing is almost finished. Once we're married, the restaurant and the real estate transfers are automatic. Her mother signed everything over already. Another man's voice, someone she didn't recognize. And the girl? What about her? You keeping her around? A pause. Then Victor laughing. She's useful, good connections, clean reputation, makes the whole operation look legitimate. Plus, she's not hard to look at. That's not an answer, Vic. It's the only answer you're getting. Focus on the accounts. Once the wedding's done and the transfer's clear, we can move on the South Side properties. The Monroes have been sitting on prime real estate for decades, too sentimental to develop it. We'll fix that. And if she causes problems? Another pause, longer this time. She won't. The recording continued for another minute, discussing details about shell companies and offshore accounts, but Scarlett had stopped listening after that. She'd heard everything she needed to. Victor Romano didn't love her. He'd never loved her. She was a means to an end, a pretty face to legitimize his operations and access to her family's holdings. Everything, the courtship, the romance, the promises, had been a calculated performance, and she'd fallen for it completely. A knock on the door. 5 minutes, Miss Monroe? Scarlett stood, smoothed her dress, and checked her reflection one last time. Her makeup was flawless, expertly applied to hide the fact that she hadn't really slept in days. She looked like a bride, like someone's dream come true. She picked up her phone, transferred the recording to her cloud storage, and tucked the phone into her clutch. Then she opened the door. Her mother was crying again. Sophia looked grim, and 2 of Victor's men flanked the entrance to the sanctuary. Inside, she could hear the string quartet playing Pachelbel's Canon, the rustle of 400 people rising to their feet. The doors opened. The sanctuary was decorated like something from a magazine, white roses and crystal, candlelight reflecting off marble columns, stained glass windows casting colored shadows across the aisle. At the far end, beneath an arch of more flowers, Victor Romano waited. He looked exactly like what he was. Powerful, dangerous, untouchable. His suit was custom-tailored, his dark hair perfect, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes tracked her movement like a predator watching prey. Scarlett had no one to walk her down the aisle. Her father was dead, and Victor had suggested she walk alone. "You're not property being given away," he'd said, making it sound like feminism instead of isolation. The quartet shifted to the wedding march. 400 people watched her take the first step. She thought about running, thought about turning around and walking right back out those doors, just like Sophia had suggested. In movies, that's what the heroine did. She realized her mistake, found her courage, and escaped. But this wasn't a movie. This was Chicago, and Victor Romano owned half the city. There was nowhere she could run that he wouldn't find her. No one who would protect her against him. So instead, she walked toward him, one measured step at a time. The faces blurred as she passed. Business associates, family friends, people who owed Victor favors or money, or both. She recognized a state senator, 2 federal judges, and at least one man she'd seen on the news being led away in handcuffs before the charges mysteriously disappeared. This was power. Real, tangible power. And in a few minutes, it would be hers too, if she went through with it. Victor's expression didn't change as she approached, but something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. Or triumph. She'd made it this far, followed the script, played her part perfectly. He had no idea what was coming. Scarlett reached the altar and handed her bouquet to Sophia, whose hand trembled slightly as she took it. The officiant, a priest Victor had known since childhood, the kind who didn't ask questions about donations or where the money came from, smiled benevolently. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice echoing through the cathedral, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Victor and Scarlett in holy matrimony." Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, 1,000 outcomes. She could still stop this, could still walk away. But where would she go? What would she do? Her mother depended on Victor's protection now. The restaurant was in his name. Even her apartment, a gift he'd called it, belonged to one of his shell companies. He'd been so careful, so thorough. She hadn't even realized she was in a cage until the door had already locked. The priest continued talking, something about love and commitment and the sacred bonds of marriage. Scarlett barely heard him. She was too focused on Victor's hand, now holding hers, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. A gesture that might have seemed affectionate to anyone watching. To her, it felt like ownership. "If anyone has objections to this union," the priest intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." The traditional pause. No one ever actually objected. It was just ceremony, words without meaning. Scarlett's phone felt heavy in her clutch. The priest smiled, ready to continue. And Scarlett Monroe, who had spent 14 months being careful, being strategic, being exactly what Victor Romano wanted her to be, decided she was done playing along. She raised her hand. The gesture was small, almost delicate, but in the absolute silence of the cathedral, it might as well have been a gunshot. 400 people stopped breathing. Victor's hand tightened on hers, his voice low and dangerous. "Scarlett, what are you doing?" She met his eyes directly, seeing the calculation there, the quick mental mathematics of how to control this situation. She'd seen that look before, usually right before someone ended up in the hospital or disappeared entirely. "I object," she said clearly. The priest blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I object to this marriage." Scarlett's voice carried through the cathedral, steady and sure. "I have something everyone needs to hear." Victor's expression didn't change, but his grip on her hand became painful. "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing." She pulled her hand free and reached for her clutch. Victor moved to stop her, but she was faster, stepping back and holding the phone up where everyone could see it. "For the past 14 months, she said, addressing the crowd now, "I've been planning a wedding, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, picking out the perfect dress, all the things a bride is supposed to do when she's marrying the man she loves." Her mother stood frozen in the front pew, her face sheet white. Sophia had one hand pressed to her mouth. "But 2 weeks ago, I learned something interesting." Scarlett's finger hovered over the play button. "I learned that this wedding isn't about love, it's about business. Real estate transfers, shell companies, access to my family's holdings." Victor's carefully neutral expression finally cracked, rage flickering across his features. "Scarlett, you need to stop talking, right now." "Or what?" She smiled, and it felt like freedom. "You'll kill me in front of 400 witnesses? That seems sloppy, even for you." She pressed play. Victor's voice filled the cathedral, tinny through the phone's speaker, but unmistakably his. "The Monroe thing is almost finished. Once we're married, the restaurant and the real estate transfers are automatic." People shifted in their seats. Someone coughed, but no one moved to stop her. The recording continued, each word landing like a bomb. Victor's dismissive tone, his casual discussion of using her, his complete lack of anything resembling affection. And then the final nail, "And if she causes problems?" "She won't." Scarlett stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening. "I loved you," she said quietly, looking at Victor. His face had gone completely blank, the mask of the businessman sliding into place. "I actually loved you. I thought you were arrogant and controlling, but I thought underneath it all, you cared, that this meant something." "Scarlett, don't." She held up a hand. "I'm not done." She turned to face the crowd, these powerful people who'd come to celebrate a union that was nothing more than a corporate merger. "My father died 6 months ago. Heart attack, the doctor said. But I think it was shame. Shame that he'd sold his daughter to save his business. Shame that he'd let Victor Romano into our family, into our lives, knowing exactly what kind of man he was. Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed through. And I've been so angry at him for that, for being weak, for not protecting me. She looked back at Victor. But I'm not weak, and I don't need protection. With deliberate slowness, she pulled the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the light, 3 carats of blood money and broken promises. She held it out to Victor. I'm not marrying you, she said. I'm not transferring my family's assets to you, and I'm sure as hell not spending the rest of my life as your convenient, legitimate-looking wife while you fuck Vanessa from River North on the side. Elena cursed softly from somewhere in the crowd. Victor's jaw clenched, the only sign of emotion he allowed himself. This wedding is over, Scarlett continued, and so is whatever the hell this was. You want my family's business? Fight me for it in court. You want my loyalty? You should have tried being honest. You want... Victor moved fast, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, he said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying all the weight of a threat. No, Scarlett said, not flinching. The biggest mistake was believing you actually cared. She wrenched her hand free, dropped the ring at his feet, and turned toward the aisle. 400 people stared at her. Some looked shocked, some angry, some, surprisingly, impressed. She saw her mother sobbing in the front row, Sophia already moving to intercept her, and she saw Victor's men, stationed at every exit, hands moving toward weapons concealed beneath their jackets. Let her go, Victor said, his voice carrying across the cathedral. Not a suggestion, an order. The men hesitated, then stepped back. Scarlett didn't run. She walked, head high, her train dragging behind her like a queen's robe. The cathedral doors were 40 feet away. 30, 20. She heard Victor's voice one last time. This isn't over, Scarlett. Not even close. She didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge him. She just kept walking, through those doors, down the steps, into the afternoon sun. Sophia caught up to her at the bottom of the steps, keys already in hand. My car, now! They ran. Behind them, chaos erupted in the cathedral, shouting, accusations, the sound of 400 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Scarlett didn't care. She was too busy sprinting in a wedding dress, her carefully styled hair coming loose, diamond earrings swinging. Sophia's car was exactly where she'd promised, a beat-up Honda parked on a side street 2 blocks away. They threw themselves inside, and Sophia peeled out before Scarlett even had her door closed. Holy shit, Sophia said, her hand shaking on the wheel. Holy shit, you actually did it. You actually blew up Victor Romano's wedding in front of everyone who matters in this city. Scarlett pulled off her veil, tossed it in the back seat. Drive to your apartment. I need to change and make some phone calls. Calls to who? Scar, you just declared war on one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. We need to leave. Tonight. I'm serious about Wisconsin. I'm not running. Scarlett pulled out her phone, already scrolling through contacts. I'm fighting back. With what? Good intentions and a recording? He's got lawyers, guns, and half the city on his payroll, and I've got the truth. Plus, she held up her phone. 3 months' worth of documentation. Every shady deal, every bribed official, every shell company. I've been copying files from his home office for weeks. Sophia nearly ran a red light. You've been what? You think I walked into that church without a plan? I knew this was going to blow up. I just needed it to blow up publicly, so he couldn't sweep it under the rug or make me disappear quietly. Scarlett found the number she was looking for. Victor's biggest weakness is his ego. He never thought I was smart enough to see through him. Never thought I'd have the guts to do something about it. And if he kills you for this, then at least I'll die free. She pressed dial. Now shut up and drive. I've got a prosecutor to call. As Sophia navigated through Chicago traffic, Scarlett Monroe, still wearing her wedding dress, still technically a bride, began the process of destroying the man who'd tried to own her. She didn't know if she'd survive what came next, didn't know if her plan would work, or if she'd end up as another cautionary tale about crossing powerful men. But for the first time in 14 months, sitting in her best friend's car, covered in silk and lace and righteous fury, Scarlett Monroe felt like herself again. And that was worth every risk. The prosecutor's office smelled like burnt coffee and bureaucratic defeat. Scarlett sat in a hard plastic chair, still wearing her wedding dress, now stained at the hem from dragging it through Chicago's streets. Across from her, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Webb looked at her like she'd just asked him to shoot himself in the head. "You want me to investigate Victor Romano," he said slowly, "based on recordings you made without his knowledge and files you stole from his home." "I didn't steal them. I photographed them." "That's still illegal search and seizure, Miss Monroe. Nothing you've given me is admissible in court." Scarlett leaned forward. "But it gives you direction, places to look, people to pressure, accounts to freeze. I'm handing you a roadmap to taking down one of the most corrupt operations in the city." Webb rubbed his eyes. He was young for a prosecutor, maybe 40, with graying hair and the perpetual exhaustion of someone fighting a losing battle. "And you think I haven't tried? Romano has judges in his pocket, cops on his payroll, and enough lawyers to bury me in paperwork for the next decade. So you're just going to let him keep operating? I'm going to pick battles I can win." Webb stood, clearly done with the conversation. "My advice? Take your evidence, keep it somewhere safe, and disappear. Change your name, leave the state, start over somewhere he can't touch you." "I'm not running." "Then you're stupid." Webb's voice wasn't unkind, just tired. "I've seen what happens to people who cross Victor Romano. They end up in Lake Michigan, or overdosed in some motel, or mysteriously vanished. The best case scenario is he sues you into oblivion and ruins your reputation so thoroughly you can't get a job flipping burgers." Scarlett stood, gathering what was left of her dignity. "My father built this city's finest restaurant from nothing. My grandfather fought in a war and came home to raise a family in a neighborhood where people like him weren't welcome. I come from a line of people who didn't run when things got hard." "Your father also died broken, Miss Monroe. You might want to consider whether stubbornness is really the family trait you want to inherit." The words stung because they were true. Scarlett left the prosecutor's office with nothing but her illegally obtained evidence and the sinking realization that the legal system wasn't going to save her. Sophia was waiting in the car, having changed out of her bridesmaid dress into jeans and a sweater. She took one look at Scarlett's face and said, "That bad?" "Worse?" They drove to Sophia's apartment in silence. It was a small place in Wicker Park, one bedroom with exposed brick and windows that overlooked a street full of trendy coffee shops and vintage stores. Scarlett had always loved it here. The neighborhood felt alive in a way her sterile high-rise never had. Inside, Sophia poured them both wine, while Scarlett wrestled herself out of the wedding dress. It took 10 minutes and some strategic tearing of fabric. She ended up in her slip, drinking cheap red wine, staring at her phone. 17 missed calls from her mother, 6 from Elena, and one text from an unknown number that just said, "We need to talk." "That's him, isn't it?" Sophia asked, looking over her shoulder. "Probably." "Don't respond." "I'm not stupid." "Could have fooled me." Sophia refilled both their glasses. "Scar, I love you, but what the hell is your plan here? You embarrassed Victor in front of everyone who matters. You rejected him publicly. Men like that don't just let that go." "I know. So what are you going to do?" Scarlett didn't have an answer. She'd been so focused on the wedding, on the confrontation, on making sure Victor couldn't hide what he'd done, that she hadn't really thought through what came after. Webb was right. She had evidence that pointed to crimes, but none of it was legally obtained. She had the truth, but no way to make it stick. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother calling for the 18th time. Scarlett answered. "Mom, where are you?" Margaret's voice was shrill with panic. "Are you safe? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. I'm at Sophia's." "You need to come home right now. Victor's people are looking for you, and they don't seem friendly." "What people?" "There are 2 men sitting in a car outside my house. They've been there for an hour." Her mother's breath came in short gasps. "Scarlett, what have you done? Victor called me. He was so angry." "He said you stole from him, that you're going to regret—" "Mom, listen to me. Those men aren't going to hurt you. They're just there to scare you into making me come to you." Scarlett forced herself to sound calmer than she felt. "I need you to pack a bag and go to Aunt Linda's in Naperville, right now." "I can't just leave my home." "You can and you will. Please, Mom, trust me." There was a long pause filled with muffled crying. Finally, "What did you get us into?" "I'll explain everything later. Just go to Linda's. I'll call you in a few hours." She hung up before her mother could argue further. Sophia was already pacing, phone pressed to her ear, having her own tense conversation. No, I'm not working tonight, because something came up. Mike, I'm taking personal days. Stop giving me shit about it. She hung up and turned to Scarlett. I called in sick for the next 3 shifts. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. You need someone watching your back, and I'm it. Sophia grabbed her laptop. Now, what's our actual plan? And please tell me it's more sophisticated than wing it and hope for the best. Scarlett thought about Webb's defeated expression, her mother's panic, Victor's men sitting outside her childhood home like vultures. She thought about her father, who'd been so proud of his business, his family, his place in the community. He'd let Victor take all of it rather than fight back. But Scarlett wasn't her father. I need to hit him where it actually hurts, she said slowly. The legal system is compromised, but public opinion isn't, not completely. What are you thinking? Victor's power comes from operating in the shadows. Bribes work because nobody's watching. Threats work because nobody's talking. But what if we shine a light on all of it? Sophia's eyes widened. You want to go public? I want to burn his reputation so thoroughly that even his paid-off officials can't ignore it. Scarlett pulled up her cloud storage, where she'd backed up everything she'd copied from Victor's files. I've got financial records showing shell companies, offshore accounts, money laundering schemes. I've got text messages between him and aldermen discussing kickbacks. I've got photos of him meeting with known criminals. And recordings of him basically admitting he was using you. Right. So we package all of it together, make it digestible, and we leak it to every journalist in the city. That'll make you a target. I'm already a target. At least this way I'm a target who's fighting back. They spent the next 4 hours organizing evidence. Sophia had a friend who worked at the Tribune, someone who'd won awards for investigative journalism and wasn't afraid of powerful people. Scarlett compiled everything into a comprehensive file: documents, photos, recordings, timelines. She wrote a statement explaining who she was, what Victor had done, and why she was coming forward. By midnight, they had something that looked less like the ravings of a scorned bride and more like a legitimate exposé. This is going to destroy him, Sophia said quietly, scrolling through the file. His business, his reputation, everything. Good. Scar, I need you to really think about this. Once you send this, there's no taking it back. Victor will come after you with everything he has. He's already coming after me. Scarlett hit send, watching the file upload to the Tribune's secure server. Now he'll have to do it in the spotlight. They sat in silence, watching the progress bar. 90%, 95%, 100%, upload complete. Well, Sophia said, I guess we're committed now. Scarlett's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? That was a mistake. Victor's voice was cold, controlled. Not angry. That would have been better. This was the voice he used when he was planning something. A very serious mistake. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, the only mistake was not doing this sooner. You think you're clever. You think you've won. She could hear him moving, the sound of a door closing. All you've done is sign your own death warrant. Threaten me in front of witnesses, Victor. I'm sure the prosecutor would love to hear that. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You went to Webb. He told you there's nothing he can do. That's because I own this city, Scarlett. I own the judges, the cops, the politicians. Your little rebellion changes nothing. Maybe, but at least everyone will know what you are. They already know what I am. They just don't care as long as I'm useful to them. His voice dropped. But you? You're not useful anymore. You're a liability. And I don't keep liabilities around. The line went dead. Scarlett set down her phone, her hand trembling slightly. Sophia was watching her, face pale. We should leave, Sophia said. Like right now. Grab what we need and drive until we hit a state where Victor doesn't have connections. That's not a state, that's maybe Canada. Then we go to Canada. But Scarlett was already thinking past the fear, past the immediate threat. Victor was powerful, yes, but power had weaknesses. She'd seen them over the past 14 months, the cracks in his armor. He loves his sister, she said suddenly. What? Elena. He's protective of her, obsessively so. Scarlett started pacing. When someone leaked photos of her at a club last year, Victor tracked down the photographer and destroyed his career. Bankrupted him, got him blacklisted from every publication in the country. Okay, so he's a psycho brother. How does that help us? Because Elena doesn't approve of everything Victor does. She thinks he's too ruthless, too controlling. They fight about it. Scarlett remembered conversations she'd overheard, Elena pleading with Victor to handle situations differently, to show mercy. If I could get her to turn on him, or at least to publicly distance herself. She's not going to betray her own brother. Maybe not, but she might be willing to tell the truth if she thinks it'll save him from himself. It was thin, desperate even, but it was something. Sophia's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned. The Tribune journalist wants to meet tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., at some diner in Ukrainian village. That's fast. She says the story's too big to sit on. She wants to verify sources and run it by her editor, but if everything checks out, she'll publish tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening, less than 24 hours from now, Victor Romano's empire would start crumbling, and he would do everything in his power to stop it. They tried to sleep, but it was useless. Scarlett lay on Sophia's couch, staring at the ceiling, playing through scenarios. Best case, the story ran, public outcry forced real investigations, Victor got arrested. Worst case, she ended up dead before the story even published. Most likely, something in between. A long, ugly fight with no guarantee of winning. Around 3 a.m., Sophia came out of her bedroom. Can't sleep either? Not really. They made coffee, sat at the tiny kitchen table, and watched the city lights through the window. Chicago looked peaceful from here, almost innocent. You couldn't see the corruption, the violence, the deals made in dark corners. You couldn't see men like Victor Romano pulling strings. I broke up with someone once, Sophia said suddenly. Junior year of college. This guy I thought I loved. He wasn't dangerous like Victor, but he was controlling. Wanted to know where I was every minute, who I was with, what I was doing. Started small, you know? Just seemed like he cared. Then it got worse. Scarlett had vague memories of this. A boyfriend Sophia had stopped mentioning. What happened? I tried to leave. He showed up at my apartment, threatened to hurt himself if I didn't take him back. Said he'd kill himself and it would be my fault. Sophia wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. So I called his bluff. Told him to do whatever he needed to do, but I was done. Then I called his parents and told them he was having a mental health crisis and they needed to deal with it. Did he? Nope. Turns out he was just an asshole, not actually suicidal. His parents got him into therapy, and last I heard, he's married with kids in Wisconsin. Sophia met Scarlett's eyes. Point is, men like that bank on you being too afraid or too guilty to walk away. They need you to believe you're responsible for their actions. But you're not. Victor's different. He's not bluffing. I know, but the principle stands. You're not responsible for what he does next. You didn't make him a criminal. You didn't make him a liar. All you did was refuse to be complicit. The words settled over Scarlett like a blanket. She'd been carrying so much guilt for her father's death, for her mother's fear, for everyone who might get hurt in the fallout. But Sophia was right. Victor had made his choices long before Scarlett entered the picture. Dawn broke over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They got dressed, Sophia lending Scarlett jeans and a sweater since her own clothes were still at the high-rise she'd shared with Victor. The thought of going back there made her stomach turn. The diner was called Stella's, a greasy spoon that probably hadn't updated its decor since 1987. Red vinyl booths, checkered floors, a menu that was 60% variations on eggs and bacon. The journalist was already there, sitting in a back booth with a laptop and a recorder. Her name was Rachel Kim, and she looked exactly like someone who'd built a career on taking down powerful men. Sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression, a scar on her chin from when a subject had thrown a bottle at her during an interview. Scarlett Monroe, she said, not standing. The runaway bride who wasn't actually running. Scarlett slid into the booth. Sophia stayed standing, watching the door. You got the files? I got them. Spent all night going through them. Rachel's expression was unreadable. This is either the story of the decade or the most elaborate revenge plot I've ever seen. It's not revenge, it's truth. Truth and revenge aren't mutually exclusive. Rachel opened her laptop, turned it so Scarlett could see. These financial records, you photographed them from Romano's personal files? His home office. I had access, but not permission. No. Which means none of it is admissible in court. You know that, right? The prosecutor already told me. I'm not trying to build a legal case. I'm trying to tell people what Victor Romano really is. Rachel studied her for a long moment. Why should I believe you? For all I know, you're a bitter ex making shit up. Because I have recordings of him admitting to everything. Because I have text messages from city officials discussing bribes. Because Scarlett pulled out her phone, queued up the wedding recording. I objected at my own wedding and played this for 400 people. She hit play. Rachel listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to interest to something like satisfaction. Holy shit, she said when it finished. You actually did that. In front of 2 judges, a state senator, and about 300 criminals. And you're still alive. For now, Rachel closed her laptop. Okay? I believe you, and I want to run this story, but I need to verify some of these documents independently. I need corroboration from other sources. I need... How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. I don't have 2 weeks. Victor knows I went to the authorities. He knows I have evidence. If you don't run this story fast, there won't be a story to run because I'll be dead. I can't publish unverified. Then verify what you can and publish that. Run it as allegations if you have to, but get it out there before he buries it. Scarlett leaned forward. Please, I'm not asking you to lie. I'm asking you to be fast. Rachel looked at Sophia. You're the friend? Best friend. Also a nurse, so I can verify that Scarlett's not crazy. That's not how verification works. But Rachel was already opening her laptop again, scanning through files. I can confirm the shell companies exist. I can reach out to some of the officials mentioned here, see if they'll comment on the record. I can... She paused, scrolling. Wait, this photo. This is Romano meeting with Konstantin Volkov. Who? Russian mob. Volkov's been under federal investigation for years, but they can't make anything stick. Rachel's fingers flew across the keyboard. If I can prove Romano's working with Volkov, that brings the feds into this. That changes everything. For the first time since leaving the cathedral, Scarlett felt a flicker of hope. How do we prove it? We don't, I do. You stay out of sight and let me work. Rachel stood, gathering her laptop. I'll have something ready to publish by tonight. It won't be the full story, but it'll be enough to start the dominoes falling. And if Victor tries to stop you? Rachel smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. I've been threatened by better men than him. I'm still here. They left the diner separately, Sophia taking Scarlett back to the apartment while Rachel headed to the Tribune offices. The plan was simple. Stay hidden, stay safe, and wait for the story to break. But at 2 p.m., everything went sideways. Scarlett was scrolling through her phone, reading news alerts, when Sophia's apartment door crashed open. 2 men stormed in, professionals who moved like military. They had Scarlett on the ground before she could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth, zip ties securing her wrists. Sophia came out of the bathroom and froze. One of the men pointed a gun at her. Don't move. Don't scream. We're not here for you. They hauled Scarlett to her feet, dragged her toward the door. She tried to fight, but they were bigger, stronger, trained for this. Sophia was shouting something, phone in hand, but the men were already pushing Scarlett down the stairs. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. They shoved her inside and the door locked automatically. Scarlett's heart hammered as the vehicle pulled into traffic, heading west toward the outskirts of the city. She knew where they were going, one of Victor's properties, some warehouse or industrial building where screams wouldn't carry. This was how people disappeared in Chicago. This was how Victor cleaned up his messes. The drive took 20 minutes. They pulled into an abandoned meatpacking plant, the kind of place that shut down when the economy tanked and never reopened. The men dragged Scarlett inside, her feet stumbling over broken concrete and debris. Victor was waiting in what used to be the main processing floor. He'd changed out of his wedding suit into something casual, jeans, a black shirt, expensive watch, like this was just another day. Cut the ties, he said. One of the men sliced through the zip ties with a knife. Scarlett's wrists burned, red welts already forming. She rubbed them, trying to get feeling back in her fingers. Leave us, Victor said. The men hesitated. Victor's voice hardened. I said leave. They left. closing the heavy metal door behind them. Scarlett was alone with Victor in a building that smelled like rust and old blood. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Victor said, walking toward her. "All I wanted was a partnership, a merger of resources. Instead, you've turned it into some dramatic revenge fantasy. You used me. I gave you everything: protection, status, access to power most people only dream about." He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "What did I ask for in return? Your family's business and your cooperation. That's it. And your other girlfriend? Where does she fit into this partnership? Vanessa is none of your concern. She became my concern when you decided to marry me while still fucking her." Victor's expression didn't change. "You're being emotional." "I'm being human, you sociopath." Finally, a crack in his composure. His jaw tightened. "I could have handled this quietly, made you disappear, blamed it on cold feet and a breakdown. But I'm giving you a chance." "To do what?" "Call the journalist. Tell her you made it all up, that you were angry and humiliated and you lied." Victor pulled out his phone, held it out to her. "Do that. Sign over your family's holdings like we agreed, and I'll let you walk away. New life, new city, enough money to start over. And if I don't, then I stop being nice." Scarlett looked at the phone, then at Victor. He actually believed she'd take this deal, believed she valued her life over her dignity. Maybe the old Scarlett would have. The one who'd spent 14 months making excuses, ignoring red flags, convincing herself that love and power were the same thing. But that Scarlett had died on the cathedral floor, somewhere between the recording and the ring hitting marble. "No?" she said. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. For the first time in over a year, actually." Scarlett crossed her arms. "You want to kill me? Do it. But Rachel Kim already has everything. She's probably writing the story right now, and when I don't check in with Sophia in..." She glanced at the clock on the wall. 15 minutes. She's calling the cops and telling them you kidnapped me. The cops work for me. Not all of them, and even the corrupt ones won't cover up a murder when there's a paper trail. She smiled. "You taught me that. Always have insurance." For a long moment, Victor just stared at her. Then, surprisingly, he laughed. "You really have changed," he said. "When I met you, you were so careful, so afraid of making waves, of disappointing people. Now look at you, threatening a man who could snap your neck without breaking a sweat. You're not going to kill me." "No?" "No, because I'm more valuable alive. If I die, I become a martyr. The story gets bigger. The investigation gets more aggressive. You'd be trading one problem for 10 worse ones." Scarlett took a step toward him. "But if I live, if I disappear on my own, the story loses credibility. People assume I was lying, that I ran away out of guilt. That's what you need." Victor's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. "What are you proposing?" "Let me go. I'll leave Chicago, just like you wanted. But I'm not recanting, and I'm not signing anything. The story runs, you deal with the fallout, and we never see each other again. That's not a deal. That's you getting everything you want." "No, it's me getting to live. That's different." They stood there, two people who'd almost made vows to each other, now negotiating the terms of their separation like a business contract. Finally, Victor nodded. "You have 24 hours to leave the city. If you're still here after that, the deal's off." "Fine. And Scarlett?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "If you ever come back, if you ever speak to anyone about me again, I won't be this generous." "Noted." He walked to the door, knocked twice. His men appeared. "Take her back to her friend's apartment. Make sure she packs." The ride back was silent. Scarlett's hands shook, adrenaline finally catching up to fear. She'd gambled everything on Victor's logic overriding his pride, and somehow it had worked. But she knew this wasn't over. Men like Victor Romano didn't forget. They waited. Sophia was pacing when Scarlett walked through the door, phone already to her ear with what sounded like 911. She hung up the second she saw Scarlett. "Oh, thank fuck. I thought you were dead. I thought..." She grabbed Scarlett's shoulders. "What happened?" "We need to pack. We're leaving Chicago." "Where are we going?" "I don't know. Anywhere. Everywhere." Scarlett pulled out her phone, checked the news. The Tribune story wasn't up yet. "We have 24 hours. They threw clothes into bags, grabbed laptops and phones and what little cash Sophia had in her apartment. Scarlett called her mother, told her to stay at Aunt Linda's, that she'd explain everything later. She sent Rachel Kim a message. Story needs to run tonight. I won't be available for follow-up. Rachel's response came within minutes. Publishing in 2 hours. Stay safe. By sunset, they were on the highway, heading south. Scarlett didn't know where they'd end up. Maybe Tennessee, maybe Texas, maybe Mexico. It didn't matter. All that mattered was distance. At 8 p.m., her phone exploded with notifications. The story had published. Tribune investigation, Romano Empire built on corruption, money laundering, and violence. Exclusive, Mafia Boss's wedding. Halted by bride's allegations of fraud documents. Reveal ties between city officials and organized crime. Scarlett read the headline, watched it spread across social media, saw Victor's name trending nationally. She'd done it. The truth was out, and she was finally free. They made it to Nashville before Scarlett's phone started ringing with numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, probably. Maybe federal investigators. She turned it off and threw it in her bag. Sophia found them a motel off the highway, the kind of place that took cash and didn't ask questions. 2 beds with thin mattresses, a TV that only got basic cable, and a bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner. It was perfect. For 3 days, they stayed hidden. Sophia went out for food and supplies, while Scarlett monitored the news on Sophia's laptop, watching Victor's empire crack apart in real time. The Tribune story had sparked a firestorm. Other outlets picked it up, added their own investigations. A federal prosecutor issued a statement about ongoing inquiries into organized crime activities. 2 aldermen resigned. A judge took sudden medical leave. And Victor Romano's name was everywhere, attached to words like corruption and racketeering and criminal enterprise. Scarlett waited for the satisfaction to hit, that rush of vindication she'd been chasing since the wedding. But mostly, she just felt tired. "You okay?" Sophia asked on the 4th morning, bringing coffee from the gas station next door. "I don't know what I am." "That's fair." Sophia sat on the other bed, legs crossed. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing." "Did I?" "My mom's in hiding, you're unemployed because you're babysitting me, and I'm living in a motel that probably has bedbugs. First, I'm not babysitting you. I'm helping my best friend not get murdered. Second, I had vacation days saved up anyway. And third, your mom is safer at your aunt's than she was in Chicago, with Victor's people watching her house." Scarlett sipped the coffee. It was terrible, burnt and weak. She'd never tasted anything better. "What happens now?" "I don't know. That's kind of up to you." Before Scarlett could answer, Sophia's phone rang. She checked the caller ID, frowned. "It's my brother." "I didn't know you had a brother." "We don't talk much. He's complicated," Sophia answered. "Yeah? Wait, slow down. How did you— Okay, just calm down." She put the phone on speaker. A man's voice, tense and fast. "Saw the news about Romano. Saw your friend's name. Sophia, please tell me you're not involved in this." "How do you know about Scarlett?" "Because I work for the FBI, and her name is all over a case file that just got bumped to priority." He paused. "Where are you?" Sophia looked at Scarlett, who shook her head. "Can't tell you that." "Damn it, Soph. We're trying to help her. The Bureau wants to offer protection in exchange for testimony." "Testimony about what?" "Everything. Romano's operations, his connections, the money laundering. She's got evidence we've been trying to collect for years." Another pause. "But she needs to come in. Now, before Romano figures out where she is and makes this a lot more complicated." Scarlett grabbed the phone. "This is Scarlett Monroe." "Miss Monroe, I'm Agent Lucas Delgado. I need you to listen very carefully. How do I know you're actually FBI and not one of Victor's people?" "Because if I was one of Victor's people, you'd already be dead." His tone softened slightly. "Look, I get it. You don't trust anyone right now. But I'm offering you a way out of this that doesn't involve spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. In exchange for what?" "Full cooperation. Everything you know about Romano's operations, testimony in front of a grand jury, and possibly at trial." "And witness protection?" "If necessary, yes." Scarlett thought about it. Witness protection meant a new identity, a new city, a new life. It meant never seeing her mother again, never going home, never being herself. It meant surviving, but barely living. "I need to think about it," she said. "You don't have time to think. Every hour you're out there, you're at risk. Lucas's voice turned urgent. Romano's already figured out you left Chicago. He's got people looking for you. It's only a matter of time before... The motel window shattered. Scarlett hit the floor, glass raining down around her. Sophia screamed. The phone went flying. Move! Sophia grabbed Scarlett's arm, yanking her toward the bathroom. Another window broke, this time in the bathroom. They changed direction, heading for the door. Scarlett's hand shook as she turned the deadbolt. The hallway was empty, but she could hear footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the stairwell. They ran the other direction toward the back exit. Sophia was faster, pulling ahead, her nurse's shoes gripping the worn carpet. Scarlett stumbled in borrowed sneakers, her breath coming in gasps. The exit door burst open. A man stepped through, gun already drawn. Not Victor's usual type. This one looked military, crew-cut, and cold eyes. Professional. "Miss Monroe," he said calmly. "Mr. Romano would like a word." "Fuck you," Sophia said and threw her coffee at his face. He dodged, but it bought them a second. They turned back, sprinting toward the front of the motel. Behind them, more footsteps, more voices. At least 3 men, maybe 4. They burst into the parking lot. Sophia's car was 30 feet away, keys in her pocket. They'd never make it. A black sedan screeched into the lot, blocking their path. The driver's door opened and Elena Castellano stepped out. "Get in," she said. Scarlett froze. "What? Get in the fucking car unless you want my brother's goons to drag you back to Chicago." The men were coming through the motel entrance now. Scarlett didn't have time to question miracles. She and Sophia threw themselves into the back seat, and Elena peeled out before the doors were even closed. Bullets sparked off the pavement behind them. Elena took a corner hard enough to throw Scarlett against the door. "Stay down!" "What are you doing here?" Scarlett managed to ask, wedged between the seat and Sophia. "Saving your ass, apparently." Elena ran a red light, weaving through traffic. "You really pissed off my brother. I'm actually impressed. How did you find us?" "I've known Sophia since college. I figured if you ran, you'd run together." Elena glanced in the rearview mirror. "Looks like Victor figured it out too. Those weren't his regular guys. He hired contractors." "How do you know that?" "Because his regular guys would have just shot you. Contractors have to bring you in alive to get paid." Another turn, this one onto a highway on-ramp. "Where's your phone?" "Turned off, in my bag." "Give it to me." Scarlett handed it over. Elena threw it out the window. They were probably tracking it. That's how they found the motel. Sophia was checking her own phone, hands shaking. "My brother's calling. The FBI agent..." "Don't answer. The feds can't protect you if you're dead." Elena pushed the sedan to 80, heading north. "We need to get somewhere public, somewhere Victor won't try anything stupid." "Where?" "I'm working on it." They drove in tense silence for 20 minutes. Scarlett watched the highway signs blur past, her mind racing. Elena had saved them, but why? What did Victor's sister gain from helping the woman who'd just destroyed her brother's reputation? Finally, Elena took an exit toward downtown Nashville. She pulled into the parking garage of a high-rise hotel, the kind that catered to business travelers and had security cameras everywhere. "We're getting a room," Elena said, killing the engine. "Somewhere with witnesses. Victor won't make a move in a place like this." He made a move at a motel. A motel is different. No cameras, no real security, cash transactions. This place has digital records, licensed security, corporate management. Elena got out. "Trust me. I know how my brother thinks." The hotel lobby was all marble and glass, a fountain in the center, staff in matching uniforms. Elena approached the desk like she owned the place, credit card already out. "Suite, please. Top floor. King bed and pull-out sofa." The clerk didn't even blink at Elena's appearance. Expensive clothes, confident bearing, the kind of woman who was used to getting what she wanted. "Of course. How many nights?" "Just tonight." They took the elevator in silence. The suite was nicer than anywhere Scarlett had stayed in months. Floor-to-ceiling windows, separate living area, bathroom with a soaking tub. Sophia immediately locked herself in the bathroom, and Scarlett heard water running. Elena poured herself a drink from the minibar. "You want one?" "I want answers." "Fair enough." Elena settled onto the couch, looking more tired than Scarlett had ever seen her. "What do you want to know?" "Why are you helping me?" Because my brother is making a mistake. Elena took a long drink. Victor's always been ruthless. It's what makes him good at what he does. But there's a difference between ruthless and stupid, and going after you like this is stupid. He's just protecting his empire. No, he's protecting his ego. The smart move would be to let you disappear, deal with the legal fallout, rebuild quietly. Instead, he's hired contractors to hunt you down, which is only going to make everything worse when the feds connect the dots. Elena shook her head. He's not thinking clearly, and when Victor doesn't think clearly, people die. So you're doing this to save him from himself. I'm doing this because you don't deserve to die for embarrassing him. Elena met Scarlett's eyes. I know what my brother is. I'm not naive, but I also know he was using you and you had every right to expose him for it. You're the one who told me about Vanessa. Yeah, and I've been regretting that ever since. Elena laughed, but it was bitter. I thought he'd ended it. Thought maybe he actually cared about you. Finding out he hadn't, right before the wedding, she trailed off. I should have told you sooner. Would it have changed anything? Probably not. You were already planning something, weren't you? The wedding objection wasn't spontaneous. Scarlett sat down across from her. I'd been planning it for 2 weeks, ever since I heard that recording. The one you played at the cathedral. I assume you have copies. Multiple. Cloud storage, encrypted drives, sent to journalists. If something happens to me, it all goes public. Smart. Elena finished her drink. You should still talk to the feds. They can actually protect you. Or they can use me as bait to get to Victor. Also possible. Elena stood, paced to the window. Here's the situation. Victor wants you dead or disappeared. The FBI wants you testifying. You want to survive and keep your freedom. Those things aren't necessarily compatible. What do you think I should do? Honestly? Disappear for real. Not witness protection, not running scared. I mean, take the money you have, go somewhere Victor can't reach you, and build a new life. Elena turned. He'll eventually move on. The empire will stabilize. The legal stuff will drag on for years, and Victor's good at making things drag. But if you stay visible, if you keep fighting, he'll never stop coming. Sophia emerged from the bathroom, face red from crying but composed. What'd I miss? Elena thinks we should disappear. I think you should survive, Elena corrected. How you do that is up to you. Sophia sat next to Scarlett, took her hand. What do you want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What did Scarlett actually want? A month ago, she'd wanted justice. Wanted Victor to pay for using her, for lying to her, for treating her like a chess piece. She'd gotten that, sort of. His reputation was destroyed, investigations were ongoing, his empire was crumbling. But it hadn't felt like enough. Because Victor was still free, still dangerous, still hunting her. I want him to actually face consequences, Scarlett said slowly. Not just bad press, not just investigations that might go nowhere. Real consequences. Then you talk to the FBI, Sophia said. You testify. You make sure he goes to prison. And spend the rest of my life in witness protection. Better than spending it dead. Elena's phone buzzed. She checked it, cursed. Victor knows I'm with you. He's demanding I tell him where we are. What are you going to tell him? Nothing, but that won't stop him for long. Elena typed a response, her jaw tight. He's threatening to cut me off. Financially, socially, the whole thing. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've got my own money. He helped me build my business, but it's mine. She sent the text, then powered off the phone. But we need a plan. Sitting in a hotel room isn't sustainable. The FBI agent, Sophia said suddenly. My brother. He said they wanted to help. Can you trust him? He's my brother. Whatever else he is, he's not a liar. Scarlett looked between them. Sophia, who'd given up her job and safety to help. Elena, who'd risked her relationship with Victor to do the right thing. She thought about her father, who'd been too afraid to fight back. About her mother, who'd spent her whole life avoiding confrontation. Scarlett had run from Victor once, at the cathedral. She'd exposed him, hurt him, damaged his precious reputation, but she hadn't finished him. Call your brother, Scarlett said to Sophia. Tell him we'll meet, but on our terms, in a public place, with guarantees. What kind of guarantees? That I won't disappear into witness protection unless Victor actually gets convicted. That I get to keep some control over my own life. That this doesn't end with me being some anonymous person in Nebraska working at a Walmart. Sophia pulled out her phone, dialed. It rang once before her brother answered. Soph, thank fuck. Are you okay? I'm fine. We're fine, but we need to talk terms. Terms? Scarlett will cooperate, but not if it means giving up her entire life on a maybe. You need to guarantee that Victor actually goes to trial, actually gets convicted, before she goes into protection. Lucas was quiet for a moment. I can't guarantee a conviction. You know that's not how this works. Then we're done here. Wait, he sighed. Look, I can guarantee that we'll build the strongest case possible, that we'll pursue this all the way, but conviction depends on a jury, and juries are unpredictable. What can you guarantee? Protection until trial, a safe house, security detail, resources to help rebuild her life after. And if Romano gets convicted, full witness protection with relocation assistance. If he doesn't, another pause. If he doesn't, we'll still help her disappear, but it'll be her choice where and how. Scarlett took the phone. This is Scarlett. I want all of that in writing. Miss Monroe, the Bureau doesn't typically... I don't care what the Bureau typically does. You want my cooperation? I want guarantees, real ones. Her voice was steady now, certain. I've already lost everything once. I'm not doing it again on a promise. Give me 24 hours. I'll talk to my supervisor, get the paperwork drawn up. Fine. But we're not coming to you. You come to us. Public place, no backup unless I can see them. Deal. Where? Scarlett looked at Elena, who mouthed a location. Centennial Park. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. She hung up before he could argue. You think he'll do it? Sophia asked. He doesn't have a choice. I'm his best shot at Victor, and he knows it. Elena was watching her with something like approval. You've changed since the wedding. I had to. They ordered room service and tried to sleep, taking shifts so someone was always watching the door. Scarlett took first watch, sitting by the window, looking out at Nashville's skyline. Somewhere out there, Victor was planning his next move. Somewhere, the wheels of justice were turning, slow and uncertain. But for the first time since this whole thing started, Scarlett felt like she had some control. Not much, but enough. The next day, they arrived at Centennial Park early. It was a beautiful afternoon, families with kids, joggers, tourists taking photos of the Parthenon replica. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware of the drama unfolding around them. Lucas Delgado showed up exactly at 2. He looked like Sophia, same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones, but older, more worn down. He carried a briefcase and walked alone. They met at a picnic table in full view of dozens of witnesses. Scarlett Monroe, he said, extending a hand. I'm glad you're safe. She didn't shake it. Show me the paperwork. He opened the briefcase, pulled out a folder. Standard cooperation agreement, protection during investigation and trial, relocation assistance after, immunity from any charges related to your evidence gathering. Scarlett read through it carefully. It was bureaucratic and dense, but the core terms were there. Protection, resources, choice, if Victor wasn't convicted. This clause, she said, pointing, what does it mean by full cooperation? It means you tell us everything. No holding back, no selective memory. You testify truthfully, you provide all evidence, you make yourself available for prep and depositions. And if I remember something wrong, if I make a mistake, as long as it's honest, it's fine. We're not expecting perfection. Lucas leaned forward. We just need the truth. Scarlett looked at Sophia, who nodded, at Elena, who shrugged. Then she picked up the pen and signed. The safe house was in Kentucky, a farmhouse an hour outside Louisville. It had security cameras, reinforced doors, and 2 federal agents who rotated shifts. It was isolated but comfortable, the kind of place where Scarlett could breathe without looking over her shoulder every 5 seconds. Sophia stayed for the first week, helping Scarlett settle in, keeping her sane. Elena visited twice, bringing clothes and books and gossip about Chicago. The feds raided 3 of Victor's properties, she reported on her second visit. Seized records, arrested 2 of his lieutenants. He's scrambling. Is he still looking for me? Probably. But he's got bigger problems now. Elena smiled. You really did it. You're taking him down. We'll see. The investigation moved slowly, which Lucas said was normal. They needed airtight evidence, cooperating witnesses, forensic accounting. Scarlett spent hours with prosecutors, walking them through every file, every recording, every detail she could remember. It was exhausting and terrifying and occasionally satisfying. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, the grand jury returned indictments. 17 counts against Victor Romano, including racketeering, money laundering, bribery, and conspiracy. The arrest was national news. Scarlett watched it on TV from the safe house, seeing Victor in handcuffs for the first time in his life. He looked smaller somehow, less untouchable. Just a man who'd made bad choices and was finally facing them. "How do you feel?" Sophia asked. She'd come back for the arrest, knowing Scarlett would need support. "I don't know, relieved, scared, guilty?" "Why guilty?" "Because part of me loved him, or thought I did. And now I'm the reason his life is falling apart." No, Sophia said firmly. "He's the reason his life is falling apart. You just stopped letting him get away with it." The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. In the meantime, Scarlett lived in limbo, safe but isolated, protected but trapped. She started writing, documenting everything that had happened, not for evidence, just for herself. A way to process, to make sense of the past year. She talked to her mother once a week on a secure line. Margaret had moved in with Aunt Linda permanently, selling the house in Chicago. She didn't say she was proud of Scarlett, but she didn't say she wasn't either. "Your father would have been terrified of what you did," Margaret said during one call. "But I think deep down, he would have been proud too." It was the closest to approval Scarlett had gotten in years. Winter came, then spring. The trial date approached. Lucas visited more frequently, prepping Scarlett for testimony, warning her about Victor's defense strategy. "They're going to paint you as a scorned woman making things up," he said. "Bitter, vindictive, unstable. Let them. I have recordings, which they'll claim were edited or taken out of context." Lucas rubbed his eyes. "I'm not saying we'll lose. The evidence is strong, but it's going to be ugly." "I can handle ugly." "Can you handle seeing him again?" That was the question that kept Scarlett up at night. She'd avoided thinking about the actual trial, the moment when she'd have to sit in a courtroom and look Victor in the eye while destroying him. "I have to," she said finally. "I've come this far." The week before trial, Elena showed up at the safe house with news. "Victor wants to make a deal," she said without preamble. "Plead to lesser charges, avoid trial." "What kind of deal?" 5 years? Minimum security? No admission of the worst charges." Elena looked disgusted. "His lawyers are good. They're making it sound like the prosecution's case isn't strong enough." "What does Lucas say?" "That it's politics. The feds want a conviction, even if it's not everything. A trial is risky." Scarlett felt something crack inside her chest. "After everything, he might get 5 years?" "Maybe. Or maybe the prosecutors hold firm and we go to trial." Elena sat beside her. "What do you want to happen?" "I want him to pay. Really pay. Not some cushy prison sentence where he's out in 3 years and back to business." "Then tell Lucas. Tell him you won't accept a plea deal, that you'll testify no matter what." "Will that make a difference?" "You're the star witness. Without you, their case falls apart." "Yeah, it'll make a difference." Scarlett called Lucas that night. "I heard about the plea deal. We're considering it." "Don't. I want to testify. I want a trial." "Scarlett, a trial is... I know what a trial is. I know it's risky, but I didn't go through all of this to watch Victor walk away with a slap on the wrist." Her voice was steel. "I'm testifying. That's not negotiable." There was a long pause. Then, "Okay, I'll tell the team. We go to trial." Scarlett hung up and realized her hands were shaking. Not from fear this time, from determination. She'd started this at a cathedral, standing in a wedding dress, objecting to a marriage built on lies. She'd burned her old life to the ground, risked everything, lost almost as much. Now she was going to finish it. In a courtroom, under oath, telling the truth about Victor Romano until there was nothing left of his empire but ashes and indictments. And if she was lucky, she'd walk away from it all still standing, still herself, still free. That was all she'd ever really wanted. The courthouse was built like a fortress, all concrete and metal detectors and armed guards. Scarlett arrived through a back entrance at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before the trial started, flanked by federal agents who'd barely spoken to her during the drive from Kentucky. Lucas met her in a windowless room that smelled like old coffee and stress. He had 3 other prosecutors with him, all looking like they'd been up all night. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I might throw up." "That's normal." He gestured to a chair. "We need to go over your testimony one more time. The defense is going to come at you hard." They spent 90 minutes drilling her on details, dates, conversations. Every time Scarlett hesitated or got something slightly wrong, one of the prosecutors would jump in with a correction. By the time they finished, her head was pounding. "You're going to do great," Lucas said, though his expression suggested he was trying to convince himself as much as her. Sophia appeared at 8:30, having driven through the night to be there. She wrapped Scarlett in a hug that lasted a full minute. "You look terrible," Sophia said. "Thanks. I brought you something." She pulled a small box from her bag. Inside was a silver necklace, simple and elegant. "For luck." Scarlett put it on, the metal cool against her skin. "I don't believe in luck." "Then for courage, or stubbornness, whatever gets you through this." At 9:15, they walked to the courtroom. The hallway was packed with reporters, cameras, people shouting questions that Scarlett ignored. The agents formed a barrier around her, pushing through the crowd. Inside, the courtroom was almost full. Scarlett recognized faces from Chicago, business associates, society figures, people who'd attended the wedding. In the front row sat Elena, wearing black like she was mourning. And at the defense table, surrounded by 4 lawyers in $1,000 suits, sat Victor Romano. He'd lost weight since the arrest. His suit still fit perfectly, his hair was still styled, but there was something different about him, something diminished. He looked up as Scarlett entered, their eyes meeting for the first time in 6 months. His expression didn't change. No anger, no regret, nothing. Just that same calculated emptiness she'd seen in the meatpacking plant. Scarlett took her seat behind the prosecution table, hands folded in her lap to hide the shaking. Lucas and his team were shuffling papers, whispering strategy. The defense lawyers looked confident, almost bored. The bailiff stood. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Chen." Judge Chen was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for running a tight courtroom. She took her seat, surveyed the room with sharp eyes, and said, "Let's begin." Jury selection had taken 3 days. 12 people who claimed they'd never heard of Victor Romano, which Scarlett found hard to believe given the media coverage. But Lucas had assured her it was the best they could do. The prosecution's opening statement was delivered by the lead prosecutor, a woman named Amanda Torres, who had a track record of taking down organized crime figures. She laid out the case methodically. The shell companies, the money laundering, the bribes, the pattern of corruption spanning years. "Victor Romano built an empire," Torres said, pacing in front of the jury. "But he built it on fraud, on violence, on the backs of people he used and discarded. And when one brave woman stood up and said enough, he tried to silence her, tried to make her disappear." The defense attorney, a man named Richard Hastings, who probably charged more per hour than most people made in a week, stood for his opening with the kind of casual confidence that came from winning cases he shouldn't have. "The prosecution wants you to believe that Victor Romano is some kind of criminal mastermind," he said, his tone almost amused. "But what they're really presenting is the vengeful fantasy of a woman scorned. Miss Monroe was engaged to my client. She had access to his private files, his home, his trust. And when that relationship ended badly, as relationships sometimes do, she weaponized that access." Scarlett's jaw clenched. Lucas had warned her about this, but hearing it still stung. "The evidence you'll see has been cherry-picked, taken out of context, in some cases outright fabricated," Hastings continued, "because Miss Monroe wanted to destroy the man who rejected her. That's not justice. That's revenge." The first witness was a forensic accountant who spent 2 hours explaining the shell company structure. It was dry, technical testimony that had half the jury looking glazed, but it established the foundation: money moving through fake companies, disappearing offshore, reappearing as legitimate investments. The second witness was one of Victor's former associates, a man who'd taken a plea deal in exchange for testimony. He described meetings where Victor had explicitly discussed bribing city officials using Monroe's restaurant as a front for money laundering. The defense tore into him on cross-examination, pointing out his own criminal history, The deal he'd made to reduce his sentence, every reason the jury shouldn't trust him. By the end of day one, Scarlett's head was spinning. The trial felt like a chess game played in slow motion, each side maneuvering carefully, looking for openings. "That went well," Lucas said that evening, back in the secure room. "The jury's engaged, the judge is giving us room to work." "Hastings is good. He's very good, but we're better." Lucas pulled out his notes for the next day. "Tomorrow we have the alderman who took bribes, then the cop who looked the other way, then you." Scarlett's stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? We need to put you on while the jury's still fresh, before the defense has time to poison the well." He met her eyes. "You ready? No? Good. That means you'll be careful, won't get overconfident." He stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be brutal." Sleep was impossible. Scarlett lay in the hotel room the FBI had secured for her, staring at the ceiling, running through potential questions. Sophia was asleep in the other bed, but Scarlett didn't want to wake her. Around 2 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "He's scared, I can tell. You're winning." Scarlett didn't respond, but the words settled something in her chest. Victor was scared. Good. He should be. The next day moved faster than Scarlett wanted. The alderman testified about taking cash payments from Victor in exchange for zoning variances. The cop admitted to burying evidence, losing files, making problems disappear for the right price. Then Lucas called her name. The prosecution calls Scarlett Monroe. The walk to the witness stand felt like miles. Scarlett kept her eyes forward, didn't look at Victor, didn't look at the jury. She put her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, sat down. Lucas started gentle. "Miss Monroe, can you tell the jury how you met Victor Romano?" She'd rehearsed this 100 times. "He came to my family's restaurant. There was an incident with one of his associates, and I witnessed it." "What kind of incident?" "He broke someone's nose." A murmur through the courtroom. Lucas nodded. "And after that incident, what happened?" "Victor started pursuing me, sending flowers, asking me to dinner, making himself part of my life." "Did you want that attention?" Scarlett paused. The truth was complicated. She'd been flattered, intrigued, seduced by the power and confidence. "At first, yes. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel special." "When did that change?" "When I realized it was all calculated, that he wasn't interested in me as a person, just as an asset." Hastings objected. "Speculation, Your Honor." "Overruled," Judge Chen said. "The witness can describe her observations." Lucas continued. "Can you tell the jury about the recording you made, the one played at your wedding?" This part was harder. Scarlett explained finding the phone in Victor's office, the accidental recording, what she'd heard. Lucas played the audio for the jury, and Scarlett watched their faces shift from curious to uncomfortable. "In this recording," Lucas said when it finished, "Mr. Romano refers to you as useful and discusses acquiring your family's assets. How did that make you feel?" "Betrayed, used, stupid for not seeing it sooner." "Did you confront him about this before the wedding?" "No. I wanted to expose him publicly, make sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was." "Why not just end the engagement privately?" "Because he would have found a way to silence me, to make me disappear or discredit me or worse." Scarlett met Lucas's eyes. "I needed witnesses. I needed it to be public so he couldn't bury it." Lucas walked her through the rest, the files she'd photographed, the evidence she'd compiled, the moment she'd realized Victor's business was built on corruption. "And did Mr. Romano ever threaten you?" "Yes. After the wedding, his men kidnapped me from my friend's apartment. He told me to recant everything or he'd make me disappear." "And those words?" "Close enough." Hastings was on his feet. "Objection. The witness is paraphrasing." "Sustained. Miss Monroe, please testify only to what was actually said." Scarlett nodded. "He said if I didn't call the journalist and tell her I'd lied, he would stop being nice. When I asked what that meant, he said I wouldn't like the alternative." Lucas let that sit for a moment. No further questions. Then it was Hastings' turn. He stood slowly, buttoning his jacket, taking his time, making Scarlett wait, making her nervous. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice friendly, "you loved my client, didn't you?" "I thought I did." That's not what I asked. You loved him, yes or no? At one point, yes. And when did you stop loving him? When you heard that recording? When you found out about Vanessa? Scarlett's hands clenched. When I realized everything was a lie. Or when you realized he didn't love you back? Hastings smiled. Isn't that really what this is about? You're a woman scorned, angry that the relationship didn't work out, and you're using the legal system to get revenge. No. No? You don't think there's any connection between your failed relationship and your decision to destroy my client's reputation? I decided to tell the truth about who he is. If that destroyed his reputation, that's on him. The truth according to you. Based on recordings you made without consent, files you accessed without permission, interpretations of conversations you weren't part of. I was part of those conversations? Were you in the room when my client allegedly discussed bribes with city officials? No, but were you present when these supposed money laundering schemes were planned? I saw the financial records you stole from his private office. I photographed them. Without permission, without legal authority. You broke into his private space and took confidential documents. Hastings' voice hardened. That's theft, Miss Monroe. Lucas objected. The witness hasn't been charged with any crime, Your Honor. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Hastings. But Hastings had made his point. He shifted tactics. Let's talk about the wedding. You planned this grand gesture. The objection, the recording, the public humiliation. You wanted to hurt my client, didn't you? I wanted people to know the truth. That's very noble. But isn't it true that you could have just ended the engagement quietly? Walked away? Moved on with your life? You wouldn't have let me walk away. So you claim, but you never tried, did you? You went straight to public destruction. Scarlett felt her control slipping. Because I knew what he was capable of. I knew if I tried to leave quietly, he'd find a way to silence me. Well, again, speculation. You have no evidence that my client would have harmed you. He sent men to kidnap me. After you'd already stolen his files and destroyed his reputation, can you really blame him for wanting answers? Objection! Lucas was on his feet. Counsel is blaming the victim for the defendant's criminal actions. Sustained. Mr. Hastings, watch your phrasing. But again, the damage was done. Hastings had planted the seed, that Scarlett had provoked Victor, that she'd struck first. The cross-examination went on for another hour. Hastings picked apart every detail of her testimony, questioned her motives, suggested she'd misunderstood or exaggerated or outright lied about Victor's actions. By the time Judge Chen called for a recess, Scarlett felt wrung out, exhausted. She'd held her ground, hadn't broken down, but it had cost her. Lucas met her in the hallway. You did great. I didn't feel great. Hastings is trying to rattle you. That's his job. But you stayed calm. You stuck to the truth. He squeezed her shoulder. The jury saw that. Sophia was waiting in the secure room with coffee and a sandwich Scarlett couldn't eat. That lawyer's an asshole. He's doing his job. His job is defending a criminal. That makes him an asshole. Sophia handed her the coffee. How much longer? Redirect examination this afternoon. Then the defense puts on their case. Lucas checked his phone. Could be another week before closing arguments. Another week of this. Another week of reliving the worst parts of the past year, of watching Victor sit there like he was innocent, of being picked apart by lawyers. Scarlett didn't know if she had another week in her, but she didn't have a choice. The redirect examination was shorter, Lucas giving her a chance to clarify points Hastings had muddied. She explained again why she'd felt threatened, why she'd chosen to go public, why she believed Victor's operation was criminal. Then she was done. She stepped down from the witness stand and didn't look back. The defense's case started the next day. They called character witnesses, businessmen who swore Victor was honest, charitable, upstanding. They called a forensic accountant who disputed the prosecution's interpretation of the financial records. They called Vanessa, who claimed her relationship with Victor had ended before he met Scarlett. She was lying. Scarlett could see it in the way she avoided eye contact, the way she rushed through her answers. But the jury couldn't necessarily tell. The defense also called a psychologist who testified about relationship dissolution and how people sometimes became vindictive after breakups. It was a thinly veiled attack on Scarlett's credibility, suggesting she'd fabricated evidence out of spite. Lucas cross-examined him hard, got him to admit he'd never evaluated Scarlett, had no basis for diagnosing her mental state. But again, seeds had been planted. Then, on day 7 of the trial, Victor took the stand. Hastings walked him through his background. Son of immigrants, built a business from nothing, pillar of the community. Victor was polished, articulate, sympathetic. He admitted to some regulatory violations, framed them as mistakes rather than crimes. "And your relationship with Miss Monroe?" Hastings asked. "I cared about her deeply," Victor said, and he sounded sincere. "I wanted to build a life with her, but she became suspicious, paranoid, started accusing me of things I hadn't done. I tried to be patient, to help her, but eventually it became clear the relationship wasn't healthy. It was a masterful performance. Victor the victim, trying his best with an unstable partner." Then came Lucas's cross-examination. "Mr. Romano, you claim you cared deeply for Miss Monroe, but in the recording she played at the wedding, you refer to her as useful. Can you explain that?" "It was a private conversation taken out of context," Victor said smoothly. "I was discussing business arrangements with an associate. The phrasing was crude, I admit, but it didn't reflect my actual feelings. You also discussed acquiring her family's assets once the wedding's done. That sounds like a business transaction, not a loving relationship. The Monroe family's restaurant is a landmark I was helping them modernize, expand. That required legal transfers of ownership. It wasn't sinister, it was practical. Lucas produced documents showing the transfers would have left Scarlett's mother with nothing." "This is practical?" "Those documents are incomplete. There were additional provisions that you never disclosed to Miss Monroe or her mother?" "I was in the process of finalizing everything when Miss Monroe chose to end the relationship so dramatically." Back and forth. Lucas attacking, Victor deflecting. It was a battle of wills, and Victor was holding his own, until Lucas played another recording. "Mr. Romano, do you recognize this voice?" It was from one of Scarlett's files. A conversation between Victor and one of the aldermen. Victor was clearly discussing a bribe, money in exchange for a zoning variance. "That's been edited," Victor said, but his composure cracked slightly. "Our forensic expert will testify that it hasn't been altered in any way." Lucas let the recording play out. "That's your voice, isn't it?" "I'd need to review the full context. Yes or no, Mr. Romano? Is that your voice?" A long pause. "It sounds like me, but..." No further questions. Victor stepped down, looking less confident than when he'd started. The defense rested their case that afternoon. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next day. Scarlett sat in the courtroom, hands folded, listening to both sides make their final pitches. Torres laid out the evidence systematically, piece by piece, building the case that Victor Romano was a criminal who'd manipulated everyone around him for profit. "Don't let the expensive suits and the smooth words fool you," she told the jury. "Victor Romano is exactly what Miss Monroe said he is, a man who uses people and discards them when they're no longer useful." Hastings countered with emotion, painting Scarlett as vindictive and Victor as a flawed but honest man caught in a web of lies spun by an ex-lover. "Is Victor Romano perfect? No. Has he made mistakes? Absolutely. But mistakes aren't crimes, and bitter accusations aren't evidence." Then it went to the jury. The waiting was agony. Scarlett was sequestered in the secure room with Sophia and Lucas, watching the clock, playing out scenarios in her head. If they acquitted, Victor walked free. Everything she'd done, everything she'd risked, would be for nothing. If they convicted, he'd face decades in prison, and she'd finally be free of him. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, they sent word they'd reached a verdict. Scarlett walked back into the courtroom feeling like she was moving through water. Everything seemed too bright, too loud, too real. The jury filed in, faces unreadable. The foreman stood, holding the verdict form. Judge Chen asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of racketeering, how do you find?" "Guilty." The word hung in the air. Scarlett's breath caught. "On the charge of money laundering?" "Guilty." "On the charge of bribery?" "Guilty." 17 charges, 17 guilty verdicts. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed for the doors. Someone behind Scarlett started crying. She thought it might be her mother. Victor sat perfectly still, his expression blank, but his hands, resting on the table, were clenched into fists. Judge Chen banged her gavel. Order. I will have order in this court. She set sentencing for 3 weeks out, remanded Victor into custody without bail. Federal marshals stepped forward, placing handcuffs on him. As they led him past the prosecution table, Victor looked at Scarlett. Just for a second, their eyes met. And for the first time, she saw something in his expression that wasn't calculation or control. She saw defeat. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Scarlett read a prepared statement, thanking the jury, the prosecution, everyone who'd helped bring Victor to justice. She kept it short, professional, and then the agents whisked her away before the questions could start. Back at the hotel, Sophia popped a bottle of cheap champagne they'd been saving. You did it. You actually fucking did it. We did it. No, this was you. You stood up to him. You refused to back down. You won. Elena called an hour later. I'm glad it's over, she said, her voice tight. Victor made his choices. He has to live with them. How are you doing? I'll figure it out. I always do. A pause. Take care of yourself, Scarlett. You earned this. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Chen gave Victor 25 years in a federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15. It was more than Scarlett had hoped for, less than Victor deserved. But it was enough. After sentencing, Lucas handed her the final paperwork. You're free to go. No witness protection necessary, though we recommend you stay cautious. Victor still has associates on the outside. I'll be careful. Where will you go? Scarlett thought about it. Chicago was her home, but it was also full of memories she didn't want. The restaurant was sold, her mother had moved away, there was nothing left for her there. I don't know yet, she admitted. Somewhere new, somewhere Victor never touched. She ended up in Portland, of all places. Sophia came with her, both of them needing a fresh start. They found an apartment in a neighborhood full of coffee shops and bookstores, the kind of place where nobody cared about your past. Scarlett took the money she'd salvaged from her family's estate and started small. A consulting business, helping other women navigate difficult relationships, protecting their assets, planning their exits. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she was 22 and thought marrying Victor Romano might actually work. But it was hers, completely, entirely hers. And that made all the difference. Portland was gray and wet for the first 3 months, which suited Scarlett fine. She needed the quiet, the anonymity, the distance from everything that had happened. The city felt like a place where you could reinvent yourself, where nobody asked too many questions about where you came from or why. The consulting business grew slower than she'd hoped. Her first client was a woman named Jennifer, who'd found suspicious texts on her husband's phone and wanted advice on protecting her assets before filing for divorce. Scarlett walked her through everything, documenting finances, securing important documents, building a case. You've done this before, Jennifer said during their third meeting. Something like it. Were you a lawyer? No, just someone who learned the hard way. And word spread quietly through the kind of networks women build. Book clubs, yoga classes, coffee shop conversations. By the end of her first year in Portland, Scarlett had 15 clients. By the end of the second year, she'd hired an assistant and was turning people away. Sophia got a job at a trauma center downtown, working night shifts that left her exhausted but satisfied. It's good to feel useful again, she said one morning over coffee. Chicago was starting to feel like a prison. I know what you mean. They'd settled into a routine, work during the day, take out for dinner, streaming shows neither of them really watched. It was simple and safe, and sometimes incredibly boring. But boring was good. Boring meant no one was trying to kill them. Scarlett's mother visited once, staying for a weekend that felt like 3 weeks. Margaret had aged since Thomas's death, her hair gone completely gray, her face lined with worry that wouldn't fade. You seem happy, she said on her last day, the words coming out like an accusation. I'm trying to be. After everything you put this family through, you're just happy? Scarlett set down her coffee cup carefully. What did you want me to do, Mom? Marry Victor anyway? Let him steal everything Dad built? Your father would still be alive if I'd just what? Been obedient? Kept my mouth shut? Scarlett's voice was sharp. Dad died because he was ashamed of the choices he made. That's not on me. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You destroyed our family. No, Victor did that. I just refused to let him get away with it. Her mother left the next morning without saying goodbye. Scarlett told herself it didn't hurt, that she'd expected this, that she didn't need her mother's approval. She was lying. Sophia found her crying in the bathroom that night. Your mom's an asshole. She lost everything. So did you. Difference is you're not blaming everyone else for it. Sophia handed her tissues. You did the right thing. Don't let her make you doubt that. But the doubt crept in anyway, especially during the long Portland nights when sleep wouldn't come. Scarlett would lie awake wondering if she'd made the right choices, if the price had been worth it, if she'd destroyed more than she'd saved. The nightmares didn't help. She'd dream about the cathedral, about Victor's hands around her throat, about courtrooms that went on forever. She'd wake up gasping, heart racing, Sophia already moving to turn on the lights. Same one? Sophia would ask. Yeah. Want to talk about it? Not really. A therapist helped, eventually. Dr. Sarah Chen was in her 50s, calm and patient, and didn't push Scarlett to talk about things she wasn't ready to face. Trauma doesn't have a timeline, she said during their 6th session. You went through something most people can't imagine. Give yourself permission to heal at your own pace. It's been 2 years? And? Some people need 5 years, some need 10. There's no right way to do this. Scarlett started going twice a week. She talked about her father, about the guilt she carried for his death, about Victor, about the weird, twisted thing that had been their relationship, about standing in that cathedral and feeling powerful for the first time in her life. Do you regret it? Dr. Chen asked during one session. Objecting at the wedding? Scarlett thought about it. No, but I regret that it had to happen at all. I regret not seeing who Victor was sooner. I regret my father dying before I could prove to him that I was strong enough to fight back. Do you think he'd be proud of you now? I don't know, maybe. Maybe not. She twisted her hands together. I think he'd be scared of who I became. The old Scarlett never would have done what I did. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. But slowly, session by session, Scarlett started to believe that maybe it wasn't. That maybe becoming someone who could stand up to Victor Romano, who could walk into that courthouse and tell the truth no matter the cost, was actually worth the price she'd paid. In her 3rd year in Portland, Rachel Kim called. Scarlett almost didn't answer. She'd cut ties with most people from Chicago, wanted a clean break, but something made her pick up. Scarlett Monroe. I wasn't sure you'd still have this number. Rachel, it's been a while. 3 years. I've been following your consulting business. Looks like you're doing good work. It pays the bills. Scarlett switched the phone to her other ear. What can I do for you? I'm writing a book about corruption in Chicago, the trial, everything that happened with Romano. I want you to be part of it. Scarlett's first instinct was to say no. She'd spent 3 years trying to move past everything, building a new life, becoming someone other than the woman who destroyed Victor Romano. But Rachel kept talking. It's not about exploiting what you went through. It's about showing other women that they can fight back, that they don't have to accept abuse or manipulation or control. Your story could help people, Scarlett. My story is complicated. All the good ones are. Rachel paused. Look, I know you're trying to move on, but what you did matters. Women need to know it's possible to stand up to powerful men and win. I didn't win, I survived. That's the same thing for some people. Scarlett agreed to think about it. She talked to Dr. Chen, to Sophia, to the part of herself that still woke up from nightmares wondering if Victor would somehow find her. In the end, she said yes. The book took a year to write. Rachel interviewed Scarlett for hours, asking questions that peeled back layers she'd tried to forget. They talked about the early days with Victor, the slow realization that something was wrong, the moment she'd decided to fight back. What was it like? Rachel asked during one session, standing at that altar knowing what you were about to do? Terrifying, exhilarating, like jumping off a cliff and not knowing if you'd fly or fall. Do you think you flew? Scarlett smiled. I think I fell for a long time, but eventually I learned to fly. The book came out in the fall of her 4th year in Portland. It was called The Bride Who Said No, One Woman's Battle Against Corruption and Control. Scarlett's face wasn't on the cover, she'd insisted on that, but her story was everywhere inside. The response was overwhelming. Women reached out from across the country, sharing their own stories of escape, of fighting back, of refusing to be victims. Some of them became clients. Others just wanted to say thank you. Scarlett did a handful of interviews, always careful to keep her current location vague. She talked about the importance of documentation, of having a plan, of not underestimating what powerful men would do to protect their empires. "Do you still think about Victor Romano?" one interviewer asked. "Sometimes, but not the way I used to. He's not this looming presence anymore. He's just a man in prison who made terrible choices." "Have you forgiven him?" "No, and I don't think I need to. Forgiveness isn't required for healing." The book led to speaking engagements. Scarlett found herself standing in front of rooms full of women, telling her story, offering advice, answering questions about how to protect yourself when leaving a dangerous relationship. It was exhausting and healing in equal measure. Then, 4 years and 7 months after Victor's sentencing, Elena called. "He wants to see you." Scarlett was in her office, reviewing a client file. She set it down carefully. "What?" "Victor, he put in a request for you to be added to his visitor list. I told him it was a stupid idea, but he's insisting." "Why would he want to see me?" "I don't know. He won't tell me." Elena sounded tired. "You don't have to go. I can tell him you're not interested." Scarlett thought about it. She'd built a whole new life on the foundation of walking away from Victor Romano, of refusing to let him have any more power over her. Going to see him in prison felt like giving him exactly what he wanted: her attention, her time, proof that he could still affect her. But she was also curious. And maybe, she thought, seeing him behind bars would give her closure, would prove to herself that he really was just a man, not the monster from her nightmares. "Where is he?" "Federal prison in California, medium security." Elena paused. "Scarlett, you really don't have to do this." "I know, but I think I want to." She told Sophia that night over dinner. "I'm going to see Victor." Sophia almost dropped her fork. "Are you insane?" "Probably." "Scar, this is the man who tried to have you killed, who manipulated you, used you, treated you like property. Why would you give him the satisfaction of visiting him?" "Because I need to see for myself that he can't hurt me anymore." Scarlett pushed food around her plate. 4 years I've been running from the memory of him. Maybe it's time I stopped running. Or maybe it's time you let sleeping psychopaths lie. That's not how the saying goes. It should be. Despite Sophia's objections, Scarlett booked a flight to California. She didn't tell anyone else where she was going, didn't announce it, or make it public. This was private, personal, something she needed to do for herself. The prison was exactly what she'd expected: concrete walls, razor wire, guards who looked at her like she was probably making a mistake. She went through security, surrendered her belongings, and was led to a visiting room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Victor was already there, sitting at a table on the other side of a plexiglass barrier. He'd aged more than 4 years should account for. His hair was graying, his face thinner, the confidence that had defined him worn down to something harder and meaner. He picked up the phone on his side. Scarlett picked up hers. "You came," he said. "I'm curious why you wanted to see me." "Straight to business. You've changed." "I had to." They stared at each other for a long moment. Scarlett tried to find some echo of the man she'd thought she loved, the one who'd sent flowers and made promises. He wasn't there. Maybe he'd never been real. "Why am I here, Victor?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I wanted to see if you'd actually done it, if you'd actually built something without me." "You read the book." "Everyone in here read the book. I'm famous again, just not the way I wanted to be." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You made me into a villain." "You did that yourself. I just told people about it." "Fair enough." He set down the phone for a moment, ran his hands through his hair, then picked it back up. "I've had a lot of time to think in here, about what I did, why I did it, where it all went wrong." "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That I underestimated you. From the very beginning." Victor's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing a business deal that hadn't panned out. "I thought you were like everyone else I'd manipulated. Smart enough to be useful, but not smart enough to see through me. I was wrong." "Is that an apology? Would you accept one if I offered it?" "No." "Then there's no point." He leaned forward. "But I do want you to know something. When I said I cared about you, I wasn't entirely lying. In my own fucked up way, I did. That doesn't make what you did any better. I know, but it's true anyway. He paused. You destroyed everything I built, Scarlett. Everything. My business, my reputation, my freedom. If our positions were reversed, I'd have killed you for that. I know. But you just moved on, built something new, helped other people do the same thing. He shook his head. That takes a kind of strength I never had. Scarlett didn't know what to say to that. She'd expected anger, maybe threats, possibly manipulation. Not this strange, almost respect. Why did you really ask me to come here? She asked. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Because I wanted to tell you that you won. Completely, thoroughly. You beat me, and I need you to know that I know it. I didn't do it to beat you. I did it to survive. Same thing in the end. The guard called time. 5 minutes left. There's something else, Victor said quickly. Information you should have, about some of my old associates who might still have issues with you. Scarlett tensed. What kind of issues? The kind where they blame you for their own legal problems. Most of them are too smart to try anything, but there's one guy, Jimmy Russo, who's not particularly bright and holds grudges. Victor pulled out a piece of paper, held it up to the glass. Names and details, written in tight script. This is everything I know about his current operation, who he's working with, where he operates, what he's planning. Why are you giving me this? Because I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a hypocrite. I used you, you destroyed me for it. We're even. But I don't want you getting hurt by idiots who can't accept that the game is over. He set down the paper. Consider it my way of closing accounts. The guard collected the paper, said he'd make sure it was processed properly for Scarlett to receive. She stood, still holding the phone. Goodbye, Victor. Goodbye, Scarlett. He smiled, and for just a second she saw a flash of the man she'd thought she knew. For what it's worth, I hope Portland works out for you. She hung up the phone and walked out without looking back. The information Victor provided was passed to the FBI. Lucas coordinated with local authorities, and Jimmy Russo was arrested 3 weeks later on unrelated charges. Whatever threat he'd posed evaporated. Romano actually helped you, Lucas said during a call updating her on the situation. I didn't see that coming. Neither did I. How do you feel about it? Scarlett thought about the question. Relieved, and maybe a little sad. There was a person in there under all the control and manipulation. Someone who could have been different if he'd made different choices. But he didn't make different choices. No, he didn't. Life continued. Scarlett's business grew to the point where she needed to hire 2 more consultants. She trained them carefully, teaching them how to help women document abuse, protect assets, plan exits from dangerous situations. You're building something important, one of them said during a staff meeting. Her name was Amanda, and she'd left her own abusive relationship 5 years earlier. This place, what we do here, it saves lives. We help people save themselves, Scarlett corrected. There's a difference. But she knew what Amanda meant. The work mattered. Every woman who walked through their door and walked back out with a plan, with hope, with the tools to protect herself. That was a victory against men like Victor. Sophia met someone eventually, a doctor named Marcus who worked in pediatrics and made her laugh in a way Scarlett hadn't seen in years. They moved in together after dating for 8 months, which meant Scarlett needed to find her own place. She chose a small house in a quiet neighborhood, with a garden she pretended she'd learned to maintain and a porch where she could drink coffee and watch the rain. It was hers, bought with her own money, filled with furniture she'd picked out herself. No one could take it from her. On the 5th anniversary of Victor's sentencing, Scarlett threw a small party. Just Sophia and Marcus, Elena, who flew in from New York, where she'd relocated, a few close friends from Portland. They didn't talk about Victor or the trial or any of it. They just celebrated the fact that Scarlett had survived and built something good from the ashes. To new beginnings, Elena toasted, raising her glass. To not letting bastards win, Sophia added. Scarlett smiled. To being stronger than we thought we could be. They drank to that. Later, after everyone had left, Scarlett sat on her porch and thought about the past 5 years. About the woman she'd been at that cathedral, standing in a wedding dress, about to burn her life down. She'd been terrified and brave and absolutely certain she'd rather die than spend her life as Victor Romano's possession. That woman had saved her, had given her the chance to become who she was now. Imperfect, scarred, but free. Scarlett pulled out her phone and opened the Photos app. She'd kept exactly one picture from the wedding day, not of her and Victor, but of herself in the bride's room before everything started. She was looking at her reflection in that photo, her expression unreadable. She'd been so scared, so sure she was doing the right thing, but terrified of what it would cost. "We did it," Scarlett whispered to her past self. "We survived." She deleted the photo. She didn't need it anymore. The next morning, she received an email from a woman in Boston. Her name was Claire, and she'd read the book. She was engaged to a man she was starting to suspect wasn't who he claimed to be, and she needed help figuring out what to do. Scarlett wrote back immediately, offering consultation times, asking for details, beginning the process of helping another woman see clearly. This was her life now. Not glamorous, not the fairy tale she'd imagined as a young woman, but it was real, and it was meaningful, and it was entirely hers. 6 months later, Scarlett got a call from the federal prison in California. Victor had died. A heart attack, sudden and massive. He was 47 years old. Elena called an hour later, her voice tight. "Did you hear?" "Yeah." "How do you feel?" Scarlett sat with the question. She'd expected relief, maybe satisfaction. Instead, she just felt empty. "I don't know. He was already gone, in a way. This just makes it official. There's going to be a funeral, small, private. His lawyer's handling it." Elena paused. "You don't have to come." "I won't." "Good. You don't owe him anything, not even your presence at his burial." After she hung up, Scarlett sat in her office for a long time. She thought about Victor, about the man he could have been, versus who he'd chosen to be. She thought about all the lives he'd damaged, including her own. And then she let it go. She had clients waiting, women who needed help, a business to run. Victor Romano's death didn't change any of that. If anything, it proved what she'd been telling her clients for years, that the men who hurt them were just men. Mortal, fallible, ultimately powerless if you refuse to give them power over you. That night, she had dinner with Sophia and Marcus. They talked about normal things, Marcus's difficult patient, Sophia's upcoming vacation, the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Nobody mentioned Victor. When Scarlett got home, she found a letter that had been delivered earlier. It was from Victor's lawyer, forwarding something Victor had written before he died. She almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won. The letter was short, written in Victor's precise handwriting. "Scarlett, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Probably had it coming. I spent 4 years in prison thinking about what I'd say to you if I got another chance. Apologies felt empty. Explanations felt like excuses. In the end, I realized there's only one thing worth saying. You were right about everything. About me, about what I was doing, about the kind of man I'd become. I told myself I was building an empire, but really I was just destroying everything I touched, including you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that seeing you build something real, something that helps people instead of hurting them, that taught me more than 4 years in here ever could. You became everything I pretended to be, powerful without cruelty, strong without violence, successful without destroying everyone around you. I hope you never think about me again. You've earned that peace." Victor Scarlett read it twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Not because she wanted to keep it, but because it felt important to acknowledge. Victor had been a monster, but even monsters were human sometimes. She'd never forgive him, but she could accept that maybe, at the very end, he'd understood what he'd done. That would have to be enough. A year passed, then another. Scarlett's business expanded to 3 cities, helping hundreds of women escape dangerous situations, protect themselves, rebuild their lives. She wrote a second book, this one a practical guide to leaving abusive relationships safely. She dated occasionally, though nothing serious. There was a lawyer named David who made her laugh, a teacher named Sam who shared her love of old movies. Both relationships ended amicably when it became clear Scarlett wasn't ready for anything serious. "Maybe I'll never be ready," she told Dr. Chen during one session. "Or maybe you're just being selective. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone keeps telling me I need to move on, Find someone new. Prove that Victor didn't ruin me for relationships. Do you feel ruined? No, I feel careful. Is that the same thing? Not even close. On the 7th anniversary of the wedding that never happened, Scarlett threw a party at her office. All her clients, current and former, were invited. Women who'd escaped abusive marriages, who'd protected their children from dangerous partners, who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. The room was full of survivors. I want to say something, Scarlett said, raising her glass. The room quieted. 7 years ago, I stood in a church and made a choice. I chose truth over comfort, freedom over security, myself over someone who wanted to own me. It was the scariest thing I'd ever done. She looked around the room at the faces watching her, women who'd made similar choices, who'd risked everything to save themselves. But standing here now, looking at all of you, I know it was worth it. Because every single person in this room chose themselves too. You chose to fight back, to get out, to build something new, and that makes you the strongest people I know. Someone started clapping. Then everyone was applauding, some crying, all of them understanding exactly what she meant. After the party ended and everyone left, Scarlett sat alone in her office. She pulled up the news article from 7 years ago, the one about the wedding objection that had started everything. The headline read, "Bride objects at her own wedding exposes groom's criminal empire." Below it was a photo of the cathedral, guests streaming out in confusion. Scarlett barely recognized herself in that moment, so young, so terrified, so absolutely certain she'd made a fatal mistake. But she hadn't. She'd made the exact right choice. Scarlett closed the article and opened her email. There were 15 new requests for consultation, 3 speaking invitations, and a message from a publisher asking if she'd consider writing about financial independence for women leaving marriages. This was her empire now, built on truth instead of lies, on helping instead of hurting, on becoming the person she'd needed when she was standing at that altar. She started responding to emails, planning her week, living her life. Outside, Portland rain fell softly against the windows. Inside, Scarlett Monroe, survivor, fighter, woman who'd refused to be anyone's possession, got back to work. The girl who'd almost married Victor Romano was gone, replaced by someone stronger and wiser and infinitely more free. And she'd never looked back, not even once.